So I highly recommend that you deepen your knowledge of these four pillars of the faith. I invite you to take advantage of some of the books that I've written, beginning with A Well-Built Faith, which really expounds on the four pillars of the Catechism in very simple terms. Likewise, my books, Practice Makes Catholic and the Bible Blueprint, can really help to deepen your knowledge of Catholic practices and the Catholic approach to Scripture, respectively. And my hope is that these books would whet your appetite to move on to resources like the Catholic Catechism for Adults from our U.S. bishops and, of course, the Universal Catechism of the Catholic Church. So remember, it's important that we're never done growing in our knowledge of the faith. This is not a goal to accomplish. It's a way of life to adapt. Well, we're going to do one more activity in this dimension that we're in, the dimension of knowing. And this exercise I call a language of mystery. Remember I said earlier that our knowledge of the faith is not just head knowledge. It's not just our mind, but it's also heart knowledge. In order to touch the heart, we need more than words. And that's where a language of mystery comes in. You know that communicating through signs and symbols is really very common in human life and in our everyday life. And one example that I get a kick out of, especially this time of the year, is watching baseball. When coaches are relaying signs to the players on the field, somewhere in the midst of all those signals and gyrations is an important message. Well, it just so happens that our God likes to speak to us through signs and symbols. In fact, more often than not in Scripture, we find God speaking to us without using words. So a big part of our knowledge of the faith comes to us through what I call a language of mystery, a language of signs and symbols. So what am I talking about? Let me show you for the next few seconds. Just watch the slide, and I'm going to show you examples of how we communicate as Catholics using a language of mystery. We Catholics sure do talk a lot, don't we? And yet, all that talking, all that communicating or expressing, as I said, is being done without using words. These pictures have a lot to say, but they don't need any words. This is a big part of how Catholics express ourselves. And yet, for some reason, when it comes to catechesis, we seem to have no loss for words and words alone. When you think about it, the place where we experience this language of mystery is in the liturgy. So what that means for us is that we need to make our catechesis feel more like Mass than class. So how do we do that? How do we incorporate this language of mystery into our catechesis? Well, what we need to do is take a look at the ingredients that I refer to as the ingredients of the language of mystery. And let's take a look at 5 simple ones. The first one is song. You know, music touches the heart in a way that words alone just can't. And if you think I'm making that up, just try celebrating someone's birthday by saying the happy birthday song instead of singing it. You know, I mentioned it's my mom's birthday today. Can you imagine if the Paprocki clan got together and we stood around my mom and we said the words of the song Happy Birthday instead of singing it? I think my mom would cry just out of what a terrible rendition that would be. Singing it is what touches a person's heart. And so we can incorporate music and song into our catechesis, either by inviting those we teach to sing, or in the case of junior high kids who refuse to open their mouths to sing, listening to music and playing songs on CDs at various points in our session. So music and song is a big part of the language of mystery. Another key ingredient of the language of mystery is ritual. Ritual is not a routine. It's doing something in a very thoughtful manner in order to express the importance of what we're doing. You see, brushing your teeth every morning, that's not a ritual, that's a routine. On the other hand, a gentleman getting down on one knee to propose to a young lady, that's a ritual. So there are many ways that we can incorporate ritual into our lessons by doing processions, ritual blessings with holy water, enthroning and reverencing the Bible, and so on. So incorporating rituals in your sessions is a great way to teach reverence. A third ingredient of the language of mystery is sign and symbol. As I mentioned earlier, God relied on sign and symbol to communicate to us. He revealed his presence to Moses through the sign of a burning bush. Well, the Catholic faith is a sacramental one. It's one that relies on sign and symbol. So be sure to incorporate signs and symbols into your learning space and invite those you teach to bring in their own signs and symbols to add to this sacred space. And you can combine this with a ritual by having your participants prayerfully set up the sacred space for each session. A fourth ingredient in the language of mystery is silence and reverence. Think back to that daily examen we did. You're not supposed to have silence when you're doing a webinar, but we're Catholics. We do things a little bit differently. All right? The mystics of the Catholic tradition teach us that silence is God's primary language. And if that's true, then we're missing a lot of God's communication in our world today that's so noisy. So be sure to include moments of silence in your sessions, to just dwell in the presence of God and to allow his silent language to seep into us. And I know when Nick was reading about some of those catechists who said they're teaching the daily examen to kids, that it's a great way to quiet them down, to bring some silence into their setting. So some of you are already doing this. And finally, fifth ingredient in the language of mystery is storytelling. It's not enough just to learn doctrinal formulas. We human beings learn best through narratives. So be sure to tell scripture stories. Tell stories from the lives of the saints. And most importantly, and don't overlook this, tell stories from your own faith life. Young people are particularly impressed when we tell them true stories of some of the ways that we perhaps have failed but been redeemed by God's grace. Now, I know we went through those ingredients pretty quickly, but if you want to learn more about them in detail, be sure to check out my book, Beyond the Catechist Toolbox. The entire book is devoted to ideas for making our sessions resemble and feel more like Mass than class by incorporating a language of mystery. I also have a webinar, a recorded webinar that I'll be telling you about in a moment that you can go to find more help in how to incorporate this language of mystery. All right, well, that brings us to the end of our second dimension, the knowing dimension. So we're two-thirds of the way through exploring becoming a three-dimensional catechist. We've looked at being and knowing. Let's turn our attention now to the final dimension, which the Church refers to as savoir faire. I call it doing. Doing things with a flair, though. For a catechist to have savoir faire is to be able to transmit the message of the gospel with style and flair, so as to really engage those that we teach.